That was a sobering piece to read and do. It is what it is. We've all tried our damnedest. So, here's some other items. James Gustav Edward Le Mesurier was the British co-founder of the White Helmets. Helmets being the operative word, I might add. A volunteer civil defense organization in the Syrian civil war, founded in southern Turkey in 2014. Now, the epic establishment clean-up operation launched in the wake of James Le Mesurier's apparent suicide was effective in the short term, but determined digging by critical journalists means the scandal definitely isn't over yet. Now, a Dutch newspaper, De Volkskrant, has published a stunning exclusive based on internal government emails exposing how officials conspired to prevent a minister publicly raising concerns about fraudulent activity at Mayday rescue. Mayday, you all know what that is. The now defunct so-called humanitarian organization behind Syria's highly controversial white helmets. These are your white hats. Let's see how good they are, shall we? The internal communications show that following the ever-mysterious demise of Helmets and Mayday founder James Le Mesurier in November 2019 in Istanbul, Sigrid Kaag, the Minister for Foreign Trade and Development Cooperation, planned to formally caution Parliament about financial impropriety on Le Mesurier's part. Several draft statements were produced over the ensuing Christmas period, in which Mayday was openly named, and her anxieties were well founded. On November the 8th, 3 days before his death, Le Mesurier openly confessed in an email to his organization's numerous international donors, of which the Netherlands had been but one, that he was guilty of misconduct and fraud, admitting to forging receipts to hide the disappearance of $50,000 in cash, paying himself and his wife Emma Winberg excessive salaries, and potential tax evasion amongst other malfeasance. While claiming this wasn't intentional, he took full and sole responsibility and warned against further investigation into Mayday's financial affairs, feeling that continued probing could expose yet more mistakes and internal failures. Now, in the wake of his apparent suicide, Volkskrant reports that the donor countries, who collectively committed in excess of $100 million to Le Mesurier's cause, convened a crisis meeting at the Dutch consulate in Istanbul, at which diplomats concluded the Netherlands was extra vulnerable given all the funding it had provided to Mayday, and the organisation having ostensibly been based on its soil, meaning millions in international payments had been processed through Dutch accounts. And funding from Amsterdam had nonetheless ceased in September 2018 after a Ministry of Foreign Affairs report outlined serious concerns about Mayday's financial practices, including a virtually total lack of oversight over and even awareness of how its money entered Syria and precisely where it eventually ended up. However, the top Netherlands State Department officials strongly disagreed with Kaag's proposal, arguing that if lawmakers were warned at all, it was best done confidentially. Really? National security again. As if the allegations weren't in fact true, it could just unjustly harm Mayday. Now, first in October, a fawning 6,000-word Guardian piece acquitted Le Mesurier on charges of fraud, which means he was connected to MI6, being an agent of British intelligence, go figure, using the helmets, oh dear, that's painful, as a Trojan horse for regime change in Syria and affiliation with extremist groups. Russia and Syria consider the White Helmets a terrorist group. Mayday Rescue reported that between 2014 and 2018, it received funding of $127 million, $19 million of which came from non-government sources. The White Helmets, they're your white hats. I told you all they were bogus. The real white hats died in the Pentagon incident on 9/11. They were few. All the clowns on the internet since are rogue and fake. I'm sorry, but that's the facts. If so, given these white hats have been around the internet for the past 20 years, why are things appearing to get worse? What are they actually doing? Nothing, because they don't exist. It's just another saviour program that the alt media has a plethora of. But what sort of non-agency or clown-based group receives $127 million in 4 years, most of which came from governments, which suggest, as I mentioned 7 years ago, the White Helmets were not working for the people, just the system. The White Helmets pass themselves off as some sort of rescue group of the people, but they are agency-based people who started the issues in Syria to begin with. And once on the ground, become reconnaissance and spies for the clowns. And they are, in essence, a smaller version of the UN Peace Corps. Same thing, which is an oxymoron, if ever there was one. Moron being the operative word and part. White hats. The next 3 stories all come under the banner of anti-white programs being ran by the Hebrew Anunnaki and their media, the Pentagon, and other clown outlets. A black man was accused of wounding 5 people during 3 separate shootings in Georgia and Alabama, told police he was targeting white men and the attacks were racially motivated, according to a recent report. Justin Tyron Roberts, the accused shooter, told police that white men had picked on him and wronged him for all his life. According to the Columbus, Georgia police detective Brandon Lockhart, who testified during a preliminary hearing on Monday. And basically he explained throughout his life, specifically white males had taken from him, and also what he described as military-looking white males had taken from him. Which all sounds like an MK-Ultra Manchurian candidate to me, to carry out an assigned project they, alongside the Pentagon, are working on to denigrate all white men and Americans. As if one shooting wasn't enough, early Saturday morning, a gunman shot and injured at least 19 people outside a bar in Austin, Texas. 6th Street in Austin, Texas was crowded with post-COVID revelers on Friday night when a man described as black with a thin build and dreadlocks opened fire outside the bar. At least 13 people were taken to the hospital, and of the 13 wounded, 11 were in stable condition, with 2 critical. Now, the suspect or suspects remains at large. It is unknown if there was one or multiple suspects involved, and there is one suspect described as a black male with dreadlocks, wearing a black shirt and a skinny build. But the city's flagship newspaper, the Austin American-Statesman, is refusing to release the description of the suspect, a dangerous mass shooter who's still on the run, because they said, quote, "It would be racist to do so," unquote. The political agenda against whites continues, and the cover-up of black crimes to not appease the black people, but to run a Hebrew Anunnaki program of the destruction of whites. Now, the Austin American-Statesman should be brought to task by the people of Texas, as this level of reporting has to stop. Senator Ted Cruz slammed critical race theory during a speech on Friday at the Faith and Freedom Coalition Road to Majority Conference, calling it bigoted. It is a lie, the Republican Texas senator said, of critical race theory, which advances the idea that students should learn about how race and racism has affected American society in the past and present day. And he described it as every bit as racist as a Klansman in white sheets. He said the critical race theory says every white person is a racist, and critical race theory says America is fundamentally racist and irredeemably racist. Critical race theory seeks to turn us against each other, he added. As a Christian and as an American, I love my brothers and sisters, whatever skin colour you are. Now, Cruz is one of many Republican lawmakers and leaders who have criticised the theory, notably the teaching of it in schools. And supporters argue advancing the theory is important so that people understand how slavery, for example, has deeply affected US society throughout history and continues to do so today. And more than 20 states, including Arizona, Arkansas, and Texas, have enacted legislation to prevent it from being a part of the curriculum in public schools. But this is the agenda we have warned about for some time, and it has little to do with colour and slavery. If it did, it would mention most of the slaves brought to America initially were actually white. Many Slavic, Eastern European, and a whole load of Irish slaves. And yet that is never mentioned. And this is about creating racism. Not stopping it, creating it, getting the people to hate on each other for something that took place many decades ago. And it's the equivalent of shaming Germans that still goes on today for something that happened before most Germans were even born. How can the modern day person be held responsible for crimes committed by other people? And this is what the Pentagon are pushing with their videos, stating all American whites are racist and all Americans are inherently evil. Don't believe me? Go and do a search on it. We revealed that in a show around a month or so ago. The Pentagon are telling you and their soldiers that all American whites are racist and all Americans are inherently evil. And we're paying for them clowns? It's all part of the Hebrew Anunnaki plot to get the people fighting each other, and it's time that people saw through it. We're going to go to Finland next, and let's have a look at what goes on in Finland. Now, Finland is a nation state in the Nordic region of Europe, and it does have national security. The Finnish police have stated that warrants are not needed for searches in cases of national security. The dreaded and misleading national security statement rears its head again. Now, Finland has a fair amount of nuclear waste, and the citizens of Finland voted to dispose of all their country's nuclear waste within the borders of Finland, to not export the problem elsewhere. And as of 2010, only Finland had begun construction of a permanent storage facility for the disposal of nuclear waste at Onkalo. Other countries had only temporary storage. Now, this country is stacked with Bilderberg meeting people goers. Jacko Iloniemi, Jorma Ollila, the Shell chairman, Nokia CEO, Bilderberg Steering Committee Johan Nykop, who's attended 10 Bilderberg meetings. And then we come to this. Party funding in Finland done by I expect all our listeners to say the same result. Yes, that three-letter clown in America agency again. When Urho Kekkonen was president, the CIA invested considerably in the non-Kekkonen wing of his party, the Agrarian League in 1962, and the financial support would have been as much as $1 million, which is a great amount at the time. Now, Kekkonen's too Soviet-friendly position was considered problematic by the CIA, and in 2013 it was revealed that his advisors Max Jacobson and Johan Villalainen supplied the American agency with information. Max Jacobson was born too. No matter which far-flung country, there's always a born too and a CIA footprint. Now, the CIA money also flowed to the Social Democratic Party. It was easy to obtain because Väinö Leskinen Brothers in Arms movement, which was still active in the early 1960s and did anti-communist work in the workplace and in organizations. And support from the CIA was also encouraged by information about Soviet support for the Finnish Communist Party, and it is estimated that the support was 1/10 of the Social Democrats' budget. Now, receiving money from intelligence services was illegal, yet money was smuggled across borders, billed overprints were printed, lotteries and fundraisers were held, and their income could then be mixed with cross-border support. It's nice to know that the CIA will go to such great lengths to give away the American people's money, all for their own political gain and programs. Now, the director of the Employers Association, Paavo Hetemäki, for his part, maintained his own channel of communication for British intelligence, but there is little information about the content of that particular contract. There you have it. A little bit of news about Finland. And it just always brings, it doesn't matter which far-flung country you go to. Born in, born to, CIA. They're like a virus. This is unpleasant. Well, again, it has to come out. And over the past 2 years, the Chinese authorities have repeatedly promised to help trace any children reported to be missing in Xinjiang to prove that they haven't been forcibly separated from their parents. And those promises have not been met. Now, the first time China made a public promise to help find Kalbina Tersan's children was in 2019. If you have people who have lost their children, you give me the names, said the China's then ambassador to the UK, Liu Xiaoming, who told the BBC in a live television interview in July of that year. And Mr. Liu denied that China's policies of its far western region of Xinjiang could be leading to a large-scale separation of children from their parents. But he said if we had any such evidence, we would investigate. We'll try to locate them and let you know who they are and what they're doing, he said. Now, out of sight, sweeping silently across China's vast western region, a campaign of mass incarceration had already begun with a rapidly expanding network of what were at first highly secretive re-education camps. A parallel network of boarding schools was also being built with the same aim, and the forced assimilation of Xinjiang's Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and other minority groups whose identity, culture, and Islamic traditions were now seen as a threat by the ruling Communist Party. Now, one policy paper published made it clear that the purpose of such boarding schools was to break the influence of the religious atmosphere on children living at home. A harrowing tale, and yet again, it throws the light on the folly of religion. What benefit do the people get out of it when it produces little to no reward? It's like working in a job for years with no pay. A bit like working for the trustee, actually. Except in this job, you get tortured, bombed, shot at, dispelled and expelled from your homes. But does anyone ask, where is your God when all this is unfolding? Again, it's like the women's story earlier. Where is their so-called God in these matters? Why is religion said to be beneficial to the people, the direct cause of so much pain, abuse, suffering, fear, guilt, shame, and death? Because more people on this planet have been killed because of religion. And at which point do we advance enough to walk away from it all? It has never served anyone any use whatsoever. Now, this story ties into the next story, whether people like this fact or not. It is ongoing and far more prevalent than your stomach or being would like to admit. When investigators in Canada began looking into allegations of forced organ harvesting on a mass scale in China. One of the ways they gathered information was making phone calls to the hospitals involved posing as patients needing an organ. And it was back in 2006 that former Secretary of State David Kilgour and human rights lawyer David Matas uncovered evidence that Falun Gong prisoners of conscience were being killed on demand to supply China's organ transplant industry. Now, a prisoner of conscience is anyone imprisoned because of their race, sexual orientation, religion again, or political views. And the term also refers to those who have been imprisoned or persecuted for the non-violent expression of their conscientiously held beliefs. And again, one has to ask, is your religion worth that much to die and suffer for? Does it give you love, happiness, protect your family, feed your children, get you jobs, protect you when the people with guns arrive, stop slavery? Well, does it? Think different. Now, their subsequent report titled Bloody Harvest, the killing of Falun Gong for their organs, concluded that imprisoned Falun Gong practitioners were indeed being used to service a lucrative and burgeoning transplant industry. And one of the many methods the researchers used in their investigation was to call the hospitals in China where organ harvesting takes place and speak to medical professionals, assuming the identity of a transplant patient or the relative of someone in need of an organ. And in many cases, those they spoke to admitted that they were sourcing organs for transplants from Falun Gong practitioners. Now, the following is a transcript of some of the recorded calls translated from Mandarin, documented in 2006 and 2016 reports, as well as from the China Organ Harvest Research Center. Zhongshan Hospital Organ Transplant Clinic, Shanghai, March 16, 2006. Investigator: so how long do I have to wait for organ transplant surgery? Doctor: about a week after you come. Investigator: is there the kind of organs that come from Falun Gong? I heard they are very good. Doctor: all of ours are those types. Shen Qiang, a kidney source liaison at the People's Liberation Army Hospital number 307 in Fengtai, Beijing, April 10, 2007. Investigator: by the way, how can you be so sure the source will be the Falun Gong practitioner? Can you find out for sure? Shen: how to identify a Falun Gong practitioner? Well, when the time comes, then our side, our boss, will have people showing you information you can be sure. We have connections with government officials. That will be the Kuomintang and may not be the actual government itself. There are connections to high-ranking officials. I will show you such material even if you don't ask me for it. Investigator: you know that several years ago they secretly detained many Falun Gong practitioners who went to appeal but did not provide their names. There were no records, no registrations. Chen: yes, this is quite normal. If Falun Gong practitioners did not give their names, they would be given a code. If their names couldn't be identified, there would be their code numbers. Also, one can be tracked by fingerprints, like our boss, like the connections to the detention centres. I cannot say casually. We have close relationships with them, Since we are engaging in this business, we have our people in each and every department. How can you get things done if we don't have our connections? This thing is just like a supply line, you know. Just like a supply line. The investigator, the patient, emphasizes that he wants the organ of the young and healthy, and the best is from those who practice Falun Gong. Will he have this kind of chance? Zhu, another doctor. Yes. The investigator, her doctor told her that the kidney is quite good because the supplier practices Falun Gong. Song, another doctor. Of course, we have all those who breathe and with a heartbeat. Up until now, for this year, we have had more than 10 kidneys, more than 10 such kidneys. Investigator, more than 10 of this kind of kidneys, you mean live bodies? Song, yes, it is so. Shanghai Runjin Hospital, October the 25th, 2006. Investigator, do you use live kidneys for transplant? Doctor, yes. Investigator, well, we have a relative in Shenyang. He said that it seemed that there were fairly large numbers of kidneys used over there and they were better in quality. He refers to that kind from Falun Gong, right? Do you use this kind as well? Doctor, yes. Investigator, wow, you use that kind as well. Doctor, every hospital is the same. Every hospital. Investigator, we hope the kidney supplies are alive. We're looking for live organ transplants from prisoners, for example, using live bodies from prisoners who practice Falun Gong. Is this possible? Doctor, it's not a problem. Dr. Shui, C-U-I, don't underestimate this small hospital. We dedicate ourselves to specializing in this organ transplantation. I believe we have the largest source of kidneys in Shandong province and perform the most transplants. We obtain our kidneys from sources throughout the country, and the kidneys leave the donor's body in less than 24 hours. The quality is absolutely assured. Our hospital president obtains the kidneys himself and performs the surgeries personally. Do I really need to add that to the exchange? Not really, unless you like a plethora of expletives. The lengths some people will go to obtain pieces of paper with numbers on never ceases to astound or disgust me to the core. And yet again, where are the so-called authorities on this? Because yet again, that is a rhetorical question. As I've told you all, authorities are connected to all authorities connected to public welfare and well-being are involved in crimes against humanity. All of them. Like the doctor said, every hospital. And the past 14 months has consigned all the medical industry now as a criminal network. And it's time we built our own. Let's pool our money and resources into the TPC and create our own medical centres without criminals, greed-based peoples, as healthcare and caring should never be a profiteering venture for an advanced species. We're talking about people's welfare and well-being here, not bloody profits. The entire world has been subjected to a barrage of warmongering pro-pagan dart against Syria, and this ties into the white helmets, by the US Secretary of State John Kerry. I wonder why. Well, we're going to reveal it. But it's a little known is the fact that Kerry's family name is Cohen. K-O-H-N. And that he is, by Jewish definition and Israel's own immigration laws, a Jew. This fact puts the warmongering by Kerry Cohen into perspective and also reveals just how deeply the Israeli Zionist supremacist tentacles run in the American government. And according to the Israeli Haaretz newspaper, John Kerry's family are actually Jews whose surname is Cohen. Now, his paternal grandfather, Frederick A. Kerry, was born Fritz Cohen in a town in what today is the Czech Republic, before changing its name or his name ahead of his immigration to the United States a century ago. Before changing his name ahead of immigration to the USA. Common sense question. Does anyone ask why this race are allowed to change their name and identity to move to another country that is not afforded to any other groups of people? In 1868, after the death of his first wife, he moved to Benish, today called Horny Benesov, and married Matilda Frankel Cohen. Benedict and Matilda Cohen were two of the only 27 Jews living in Benish, which is listed as having a total population of 4,200 in 1880. Now, soon after Benedict died in 1876, Matilda moved to Vienna with her children Ida, Fritz, and Otto. Now, Fritz and Otto excelled in their studies in Vienna, and both Cohen brothers abandoned their Jewish heritage and converted to Roman Catholics. Another tactic they used to hide their identity, just like the Donmei in Iran and the Spanish conquistadors that raided America and Central America. Now, in addition, in 1897, Otto decided to shed the Jewish-sounding name of Cohen. He chose a new name by dropping a pencil on a map, and the pencil landed on Ireland's County Kerry. Seriously. In 1901, Fritz followed his brother's example and officially changed his name to Frederick Kerry. Fred, who worked as an accountant at his uncle's shoe factory, married Ida Lowe, a Jewish musician from Budapest, Loewe. Now, Ida was a descendant of Sinai Lowe, Loew, a brother of Rabbi Judah Lowe, the famous Kabbalist, philosopher, and Talmudist known as the Maharal of Prague, who some say invented the character of the Golem. Now, Lowe, Loew, means lion. Lion bastards, more like it. But it's the big cat. Hence the symbolism of the lion on all prominent Elites' family crests. Now, the Maharal is the subject of legends about the creation of a golem, a creature made out of clay to defend the Jews of Prague ghetto from anti-Semitic attacks, particularly the blood libel. Now, he is said to have used mystical powers based on the esoteric knowledge of how God created Adam. But their God is Lucifer. Just saying. It was their Adam, not ours. But what he did use was dark magic. Made out of clay is incorrect. The entity, came out of the clay because the golem was non-corporeal. Jinns is the real truth. And I guess Lord of the Rings has a different meaning now. You've ruined it. You've ruined everything. In 1905, the young family immigrated to America. After entering through Ellis Island, the family first lived in Chicago and then settled in Boston. Fred and Ida had 2 more children in America, Mildred and Richard. Fred and Ida had their 3 children lived in Brookline, where Fred became a prominent man in the shoe business. And in 1921, Fred Kerry, at age 48, entered a Boston hotel and shot himself in the head. Now, Richard was only 6 years old when his father committed suicide, and he attended Phillips Academy, Yale University, and Harvard Law School. Well, I never. Harvard and Yale are the breeding grounds for the clowns and psychopaths. Now, after serving in the US Army Corps, Kerry worked in the US Department of State and later the Foreign Office. This is Richard, by the way, not square bob face. And he married Rosemary Forbes, the beneficiary of the Forbes Family Trust. Yes, that Forbes family. Now, the Forbes family had amassed a huge fortune in China trade. I wonder what they were trading in. What we do know is it was most likely opium. Now, Richard and Rosemary had 4 children: Marjorie, John Kerry, John Cohen, Diana, and Cameron. John, a Massachusetts senator in the 2004 Democratic nominee for president. And Cameron, who married a Jewish woman and converted to Judaism in 1983, is a prominent Boston lawyer, aren't they always? But John Kerry was not the first US Secretary of State to have a Jewish family past later in life. In 1997, it was revealed that the Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, who was born in Prague, was actually Jewish, as if people seeing her visage could not tell that. Now, Albright is more famous for telling the world during a television interview that the deaths of over 500,000 Iraqi children caused by a US boycott of medical supplies was worth it, she said. In the past, they could hide, name change, and use codes. But now the world is watching, and soon the whole world will be watching what these psychopaths are up to.